Hello, thank you for joining us for our Introduction to Batch Scripting class. Class will be about an hour long and it'll take you through the basics of working with the Windows command line and creating and running batch scripting files. If you have any questions at any time, please enter them into the chat. I will get to them as soon as I can. And of course, let's begin. So, who am I? My name is Nicholas Fagerlund. I've been in the IT industry for 20 years now. I got into the industry officially back in 2006. I was working previously on a contract for HP down in the lower mainland, doing mid-range printer repairs and laptop repairs, but I officially got my degree in 2006. I've worked with clients such as ExxonMobil, CompuCom, BCLC, and I've been internal technician for Fully Managed, Sav Technology, and R2 Gaming. Those are the bigger clients. There's been other clients as well. We've done everything from desk side repair to server management, cloud infrastructure management, and everything in between. So let's get into it. What is DOS? So DOS is the basic operating system that launched with the IBM PC in 1981. It was previously QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System, and was produced by a man in Seattle in 1980, but was purchased by Microsoft in 1981. It's been the fundamental operating system for most Windows transactions. So for example, 95, 98, ME 2000 all had DOS as a base layer. In 2000, it was fully integrated into the operating system with the Windows command line interface, with the start of XP and the new generation of Windows operating systems. So, before we get started, we need to know what we're dealing with. You need to know some commands for working in DOS. If you're on a regular Windows PC, the easiest way to get access to the command prompt is the Windows button and R. The Windows button is the button on your keyboard that will be between the Control and Alt button. If you press those, it will bring up the Run interface. And to pop open a command window, type in CMD. This will launch our Windows command line interface. Now, I'm not presently running in administration mode. You shouldn't run in administrator mode unless your task specifically needs it, because you want to limit the scope and control of what the script or program you're running can do. So here's DOS, fairly easy. If you've used it before, it'll come back like riding a bike. For our commands, we have directory, lists whatever directories or files are in the current directory. We use the CD to change the directory. MD makes a new directory. RD removes a directory, and copies files. So for the directory that we're in here, if we do a dir, we can see we have no directories, but we'd have two things that are showing as directories, the dot and the double dot. So these are not really directories, they're links back to the previous directory. For example, if I go cd dot dot, oh, sorry, not number one, dot dot, that will bring me back to the C drive. I don't have to go back like that. Let's say we want to make a new temp directory as before, just md temp. And now if we do a directory listing, we have a temp folder. We can go into that by using cd again, and that will bring us into temp. Again, to step back, cd dot dot, and we're back in the regular temp folder. Now, if you ever have any questions about any of the commands on the command line interface, you can do, for example, cd /?, and that will give you a listing for all the information on that command. So there's two different things. CD is the short version, but you could also do chdir, works as well. The D switch allows you to change different drives, but for most, if you were to do like cd / or d : /, you'd be able to get into your D drive without the D switch. All commands have something like this if they're included in the base operating system. So if you're at sea, you want to get to your desktop. This will be covered a little bit later, but I'll give you the short version here. You can enter. Sorry, just got to bring this back up. Where did you go? Okay. So to be able to get to your desktop, if you go cd users, or cd user, sorry. That should be, you can use environmental variables to be able to get to, for example, your desktop. Give me 30 seconds here. Let's find. It should be cd users. I'm not sure why it's not pulling here. User profile, my apologies. And then if you were to go to, say, sorry, wrong switch. Still not doing it. So it's cd user profile. Awesome. Okie dokie. Let's get back to what we're doing. Okay, so basic commands to move around. Some others. Del deletes a file. Ren renames a file. If you want to see what the contents of a file is, type will allow you to do that. Pop open my window again here. We can go, let's see. I've got 4 scripts here. Let's take a look at the go-to file. It'll put all the text of the file and it'll read anything that's not a binary out. And even if it is a binary, try and read it out, but it might not make a heck of a lot of sense. Moves files between folders. Xcopy is the same sort of thing as copy, but it provides a lot more features. For example, if you're going over a network, it has a feature if the command ends, by running the command again, it will restart where it left off. So if you have, say, large amounts of data that you're moving from one hard drive to another hard drive, Xcopy is a great way to do that because you have that error checking. And then, of course, there are the commands that were added by Windows. These are not base. These are specific to Windows itself. For example, with ipconfig, if you're troubleshooting internet connection, you can see everything associated with your IP address. or your not IP address, but your network sockets. For a trib that allows you to take a look at and change file attributes, change permissions. If you're having some problems accessing files, you can remove them so that the current user can access it, that copies that can be read, that can be run. This won't work unless it's in an admin command prompt. For most things, that's not a big deal. Ping tests your network connectivity to an IP address. For example, one that's used a lot by support is ping 8.8.8.8, which is Google's DNS servers. If you can see Google, you can usually see the rest of the internet. And it'll give you an idea of what's going on. As always, if you want to know more features, / will give you a list of all the different modifiers that you can add to that. Traceroute is great as well for if you're having problems with a specific site and you're trying to figure out, is this just your computer or is this the entire internet? It'll do a hop by hop to that site and back. So for example, let's do again what we were doing. We're going to do a traceroute to Google. So that's 8.8.8.8. And it'll show you every step of the way. Sometimes it takes a minute. Some hops will not have a response depending on the network, but usually it gives you a good idea of where to look. If you can see 2 or 3 hops out, as long as you can pass it from your internal infrastructure, that usually means it's not a you problem. It's something outside of your network. If you ever want to cancel a running command, just hit Control-C and that will abort whatever command you are currently running. Netstat is another great one. It shows you whatever's open and whatever's listening. My apologies. And it can be great to diagnose if you have a communication conflict or for seeing if there's something on your system that's listening that probably shouldn't be. So another, nice. Yeah, it's about 8 or 9. It really depends on what your ISP is and what configurations are in place between your computer and Google's DNS servers. So next we have task list. This is also great if you're trying to figure out if something's causing problems. Let's say, for example, you see this AI.exe. And whatever this AI.exe is, you're pretty sure it's a bad program. You can get the PID by using task list, and it goes the name, the PID, what type of service it is, if it's a console service, a regular service, how many counts, and how much memory it's using. You can then use this to kill that task. So let's say I want to kill that AI.exe. I would do task kill, and I would do /PID, and then that number to kill that task. It's great if you have a stuck task, like for example, a installer that Windows cannot shut down, and you've tried going into, your task manager, you've tried shutting it down from there, nothing's working, this task still stays running. This will kill it almost no matter what. However, expect if it's a core process, you're going to have a little bit of instability after, and it may be wise to restart after you're done whatever you're doing. System info gives you a rundown of all of the information for your local machine. What hotfix is, how much memory is available, what OS you're running, all of that. And that's very useful if you are diagnosing a remote computer and something doesn't add up, or if you see something in the network and you've connected in and it just doesn't really add up. This gives you a full readout of what you're seeing there so that you can figure out, is this the machine that I think it is? Now, user is also a great command too. It's used a lot in system admin work, creating profiles, destroying profiles, granting permissions. That's all done through net user. And this allows you, as long as you already have permissions, to create user profiles of any access level on your machine or destroy them. Diskpart, of course, allows you to partition disks. It's got a bit of a weird interface. So if you were to run Diskpart, it has to be run in a administrator command line interface, and it'll look like this. Same sort of thing. If you type help, it'll give you all of the commands. To work with a disk, you're going to have to display all the disks and then select whatever disk you want to work with. And then from there, it will allow you to create, to shorten, to repair, to remove disks. Just keep in mind when you're using it, the command to get all of the subcommands is help. It's not / like with the rest of the Windows system. So, variables. This is one of the most useful features of the Windows batch system and batch files in general, allowing you to set and return different addresses, different configurations with just a quick command. You can pipe information from other commands into this set command to set the variable as that. You can also use this when you're, for example, say you want to run Notepad. You could put Notepad exe in a var and then just simply pipe out that variable and it will run notepad.exe. Very, very useful, and we're going to be using them in some of the scripts that we do today. They're also heavily used in the example scripts in the email that was included there. You'll see about halfway through the email, there's a link to a GitHub that has a whole collection of sample scripts that are used within the support community. A lot of stuff is very useful there. It's interesting to see how they've done stuff. It'll answer a lot of questions that you have when you get into some of the more finicky parts of batch scripting. To reference a variable, it's just %, the name of the variable, and %. So in our example, we used the name var. To reference that, it's %var %. Please make a note, though, when you're setting a var, do not put a space between the variable name and the equal sign, or else Windows will think that's part of the variable name. This has been an issue for many years, and it's one of those no-fix things that Microsoft is never actually going to fix. But if your script is being funny and not reading a variable properly, check to make sure that you're referencing the variable like that. So set var equals instead of set var space equals. Another useful variable is windir, which gives you your Windows directory. So if we go that gets us into Windows. If you want to run a program, it's just as simple as putting in the name of the exe while you're there. So if we were to do notepad.exe while we're in the Windows directory, boom, we have a notepad document. There we go. Why are you not? Oh, I see what I did. My apologies there. There we go. Okay. Put the colon in the wrong place there. Okay, so next we have the for command. The for command allows you to loop through things. If, for example, if you wanted to output all of, say, for example, you want to output all of the text of all of the text files in a directory, you could do for %% in and then star.text, do echo and then processing file, and %% will be the name of the file. So %% every file that in gets. So for example, if it were say entry.txt, say log.txt, %% will be the name of that file. And the star is just a wildcard. So that means anything that could possibly match that will be handled by the script. So log.txt, any.txt, n.txt would all be processed the same way. And the name would be put out like this. If you wanted to, for example, put out all the text, you could just do type and then %f, or %f, and it will put all of that text onto the screen. Another example here lists all the directories in C users with this script. So again, %d in C : /users /star. It will take every directory it finds in there and echo out the name of it. So again, more with the for command here. Say you want to do something 10 times. You can use a for loop. So for this one, we have %I for our variable. It starts at the number 1, it increments by 1, and goes up to 10. And this is always going to be for your for command. This is always going to be your syntax. You need the variable that you're using, which is %I in, and then in brackets, the number you're starting with, how much it increments every loop, and what your maximum loop is. So in this example, it will output the numbers 1 to 10. The /L specifies that it's a numeric loop. So another example. For /F tokens equals 1, 2 delims equals a variable in directory /B, do echo file extension. That will echo out all of the files and extensions within that directory. If else are another great way to control what's happening with the flow of your program as well. So let's say we put if exists any.text, it would run the command, for example, text any.text, else create any.text. It's great for detecting if something exists or if you're in a specific state. The other thing you can do is run this on error level, and we'll be covering that in a little bit. Error level is a variable that's set. Well, it's not really a variable. It's more like a function that's set when a command fails to execute properly. Error level 0 means everything's gone okay. Error level 1 means that there's been an issue somewhere in that command and that you want it to do something else. So, for example, let's say we did del non-existent file.txt. That would set error level to 1, and then we can do an if error level 1. We can either echo, or we can create the file or run another command. So again, as the example, we have if notepad exists, it spits out notepad exists. If it can't find notepad, no notepad was found. Okay, so let's get into some examples. So I've done a few different examples here. Give me one quick second. Where are we here? Okay, so we have 4 different example files here to go over. Let's just start with a simple backup first. This is what most people will use batch scripting for creating some sort of automatic backup so that, they don't have to worry about backing up their My Documents or moving files to folders. I do development for a game called Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead, and I have a script set up where it will copy from my GitHub folder over to the actual launcher all of the code that I've changed, and then it will run the game so that whenever I'm testing, I'm always working with the most recent version of the code that I've made. So for batch files, Windows Notepad is good enough technology for actually writing the code. And for this one, we start with echo off. And what echo off does is it hides all functions that run except for echo. So for example, say starting backup, but it won't display set source path and set destination path. This is also another way of doing variables. You can put the entire thing in quotation marks and it will process that. And then we're using Xcopy to do the copy. And once it's complete, it just displays backup completed and then pauses to confirm. If you want it to just close, remove the pause at the end. The batch script, once it's done, will just close and hide itself. And then these are the different switches. I have SEHY set, so It copies directories and subdirectories, including empty ones. If you're doing it, it should be set for E. Now, the documentation doesn't explain why. Usually I do this anyway. It's safe to do it. You aren't going to exclude anything by doing it. /H copies hidden and system files, and /Y suppresses the prompt to confirm if you're going to overwrite a file. The problem with this is this copies everything. It doesn't care if it's the most recent version of the file. It doesn't care when the file was changed. Everything goes from A to B, which sometimes that's what you want. If you have, say, a hard drive that's failing and you want to make sure it's the most recent version of everything, A to B is the greatest way to make sure you have that with no corruption. That being said, it's usually more efficient to replace that failing hard drive or failing resource. So a more structured version of this would be our second backup file. And it looks, if you saw the last one, it looks pretty similar. The only thing that's changed is we use the D/ now instead of the /S. And that makes sure that it only copies any files that the dates are different. For example, if you have, say, an image that's more recent than the one that's in that backup, it will overwrite the one in the backup with that more recent image. That works for everything: documents, files, executables, everything. We also set /R to make sure we're overwriting read-only files with this one, because with the /D, where it's going by date, sometimes it will have issues where it's set to read only, but normally the script would copy over it, but now since you're comparing the date, it functions a little bit differently. So you have to force it to do that overwrite. If you ever want to make a new batch script, that's also pretty easy. You saw with two of them, by right-clicking and hitting edit, we can edit them. You can do Notepad or Visual Studio, but to save them, all you need is in the file, whatever you have it opened in, hit save, and eventually, save as. And then when you're saving it, make sure you include the file type, so backup2.bat, and put it in quotation marks. Quotation marks ensures that it is saved as you have written it. So it's not saved as a text file, it's saved as a bat file. Normally with Notepad, it will do it anyways. If you just do backup2.bat, it will save it as a bat file, but doing quotation marks ensures that it will do as you need it to. Already exists. Let's replace it. So next we have GoTo. This is just an example of using labels and GoTo that we discussed earlier. So for this, we prompt the user for input using the /P for set, and then we give them the choice: enter start, middle, or end to jump. If they go start, goes to, sorry about that. My mute went on there. Okay, so cycling back. So if we use set with /P, we can either enter start, middle, or end, and it will jump to that section in the next section here. If we provide no choice, it goes to the default path. else it goes to start or middle, and then it jumps to the end of script using goto. And with our internet checking script, we ping google.nl one time, that's the /n, and then /w is for 1000 milliseconds. If error level is 1, it tells us we're not connected to the internet, else we're connected to the internet. And if we run it, it says we're connected to the internet. Now, still got a few minutes left. Let's pull up those scripts. So, first and by far most useful, unlocking an AD account. If you're a system admin, you get this request 1,000 times a day. Easy enough to do. Now, that being said, you are running, if you run the script, you are running under your own context. So you need to make sure that you have permissions to unlock these accounts. And it runs unlock /AD account, AD_account.ps1, and then the account names. This is very useful in a command line sense when it's first thing in the morning and you have 3 users who don't never remember their passwords. They're going to lock themselves up every morning. So 8 a.m., you have the same 3 users calling in. First one calls in, run this account, everyone's unlocked. And then they can all try again. Just tell Mandy when she calls in, tell the other 2 your account's unlocked. And they're usually good to go from there. Okay. Another useful one, enable RDP. So you'll often have to remote into users' computers if you don't have remote access software like Enable, AnyDesk, TeamViewer. This is what you're going to have to use. So what are we doing? NetSH. So we're changing firewall options and we're setting a rule that allows remote desktop. We're going to change a registry key with the reg. I didn't really cover the reg command because it is a command that is very easy to cause some serious damage to your computer with. But with this, if you know the exact path in the registry to it, you can then add keys or remove keys or change keys. And the text it's adding is fdeny TS connections, and it's a dword 0f. So if we go into our registry editor, if it will allow me to so we do that by regedit. Of course, it's going to set off all the alarms on the computer because most users don't need to be tinkering with this. We can see the registry. Now, it's a bit beyond the scope of this class on using the registry, but if you go through here, you can see that this path exists, and that's all you're doing here is you're walking down that path in the registry. And then when you get there, so we're going to current control set control terminal server, control terminal server. Where are we here? We can see there are a number of things set. And this is the fdeny ts connections. Its type is reg dword, and it's already set to 1. And that's all this script is doing. It's setting that entry there to 0. And you can do this with most things in your registry Hive. This is, again, why I didn't go over it. It's more of a complex additional topic. Then we go to the service. We configure the terminal service to automatically start on startup. And then we net start the terminal service so that you can remotely access that computer using RDP. Another useful thing that's used a lot with support is cleaning up temp files. Windows is horrific for leaving all kinds of debris on your client system. So usually it's in temp folders, but sometimes it's in Windows directories. Log files can get incredibly bloated. You have all sorts of different paths and spaces that Windows tries to hide this stuff. And what the script does is for each different version of Windows, it targets those areas. Like, for example, your My Documents, it's removing all temp files, it's removing application history, temporary internet files, recent. All of these are bloat. They're useful to have for like your recent files, but for local settings temp, yeah, no. Especially Adobe Flash Player. If you're still using Macromedia or Adobe Flash Player in this day and age, you should disable that. And then, of course, other various different, for example, NVIDIA ATI, AMD, they have their own specific log files and places that they hide stuff. And that's what the script is. It's just a compilation of all of those places. Windows one-liners is just a whole bunch of useful commands to everyday tasks. For example, checking the smart status of all disks uses WMIC. Also, another command we didn't cover because it is a more advanced command. It's very, very easy to break something with WMIC. Run DLL32 using Print UI to install a printer. This is another thing that is incredibly useful to be able to manage and install printers from your desk instead of having to go to each and every one. Instead, if you already have a server and printer set up, you can just copy that, run that. Everything gets set up for everyone there. You can also add this into a login script. You want to add a specific static root, use the root. Another command we didn't because if you start adding static roots, you have to remember that you've added them and change them when they are no longer relevant. That's important because you can seriously break things if you don't remove it after you add a static root. Deleting registry keys, seeing if different versions of the .NET framework's installed. These are all very, very useful things. Seeing what shares are open and available on the computer. Because again, some people will just go and do. And it's incredibly easy for a user to open up a share on a work computer that you really don't want being there, that provides full access to a resource you don't want unauthorized people to access. For example, say your accounting ladies in accounting, they have a folder where they have all the scans of all the accounting documents they have. Well, some of them will just share that folder amongst 3 or 4 computers, but not put any restrictions on it. So Bob down in janitorial, who has access to a computer, could see all of those receipts. That's not what we want. So we want to go through and make sure that all of those shares are closed if possible. Again, remotely shutting down a computer. Very, very nice thing, especially if, let's say, for example, you have a user that you have warned, you have mates, you've warned them, you sent them emails, you talked to them. They're never going to actually shut down their computer. And of course, you do a quick ping test to their IP, and yeah, their computer is still running. This command, shutdown, will kill that computer. It will just turn it off, which is nice. Especially if you have 30 or 40 of them that you've warned. The maintenance is going to happen at this point, and they need to be aware that the computer needs to be shut down at this point. Well, too bad, so sorry, it goes off. So, host name, also great. You get the user, or you get the machine name of the computer you're on, which is useful if you're trying to hunt something down in Active Directory. You've accessed a computer, you're not quite sure what it was originally named. Host name will give you that name. Run as allows you to run as a different user account, which is very, very useful when you have to get those administration level scripts. And as you see, you will have to provide a password for that as well if you're running in the context of a local user. And then we go into some PowerShell stuff. PowerShell is beyond the scope of this class. Now, that should about cover most everything that we've talked about today. All of the links to the software we've shared, the script we shared is in your initial email. It'll be sent out in an additional email at the end of this class. If you have any questions, any concerns, anything at all, please reach out to us at help@ntlearning.ca, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. The video for this will be posted up on our channel. Again, if you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, please reach out to us at help@ntlearning.ca. Thank you, and hope you have a nice day. Thank you for joining us. Bye now.